Hello everyone, it's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. Hope everyone is doing okay this evening. Hopefully the signal holds out a little bit better than the signal was holding out earlier. I was getting it in and out. I didn't see it too bad when I looked at it, but still, people were complaining. So let me check my sound. Always check your sound. Guys, I want to thank everyone. I want to take this moment to thank everyone who helps the channel, whether you send content, whether you like the videos, share the videos, all of it is appreciated, and thank you. Um, so I, I I'm a Twitter hawk. I tend to watch Twitter. I tend to even organize myself around Twitter. I post things to my Twitter account that I think I may be interested in talking about. I saw a brazen attack on Glen Greenwald. Brazen because it seemed to be made out of whole cloth. In one case, somebody said, do we have faith-based journalism at this point? Because that seems to be where we are. Glen Greenwald took a trip to Russia. Listen to the way Glen Greenwald explains why he went. And I'm going to let you also hear what they said he said. All right, right here. This. Glen Greenwald. I came to Russia to combat U.S. toxic view on the country. Too many people in the United States consider any contact with Russia suspicious or worse. Journalist Glen Greenwald told RT. Combating this toxic attitude is one of the reasons he decided to come to Russia this weekend. RT caught up with Glen Greenwald, who is best known for his expose on the U.S. election surveillance programs based on the documents leaked by NSA whistleblower Edward Snowden after he took part in the expert panel on the phenomena of fake news. Here's the full interview transcript. All right, so I'm going to play part of this. This is a short part.
American lawyer and journalist Glen Greenwald is best known for publishing the documents disclosed by the whistleblower Edward Snowden. Greenwald is currently in Moscow for a cybersecurity conference. He says much of America's political class believes Russia is genuinely the #1 enemy.
There's an obsession in the United States with viewing Russia not just as an adversary, but as an actual enemy. It's permeated both political parties. There's actually talk a lot now about how what they regard as the interference in the 2016 election is similar to Pearl Harbor when the Japanese attacked the United States during World War II, or Al-Qaeda at 9/11. And so there's this sense that Russia is now an enemy on par with Al-Qaeda or the Japanese during World War II. Russia is often talked about this way, in the sense that any kind of connection with or interaction with Russia is viewed as inherently suspicious or even worse. And it's extremely dangerous and extremely toxic. And it's one of the reasons why I decided to come here. And this morning posted a picture of myself and Snowden, because I think it's very important to combat that attitude.
I agree with him. I think it's nonsense. A person, an American, can go to Russia anytime that American wants to go to Russia, providing we're allowed in the country. I don't necessarily gain any more suspicion on Glen Greenwald as I would anybody else for something like that. You have a passport, you can go wherever you want. And he's also right. And just to prove he's right, look at the comments aimed at Glen Greenwald. Now, I'm going to show you a few of these because some of this is breathtaking. And I want to get to one very specific one, dealing with a propaganda outlet that has a history to it that you must and need to know about. So, Malcolm Nance, right here. Hi, y'all. I got Glen Greenwald. The act of misrepresenting a more intelligent person's superior argument, typically on social media in the form of a poorly written material under the guise of journalism. It only took 2 years for Greenwald to go full Louise Mizinich. Honored. Right here. And here's the other one. MSNBC does not merely permit fabrications against Democratic Party criticisms. Now, this is an article that was written when he kind of responded, talking about the Russia stuff. Nance, you must understand, Nance is the guy who lied on MSNBC's Joanne Reed, saying that, what is her name? Jill Stein had a program on RT. Which is nonsense. It didn't happen at all. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, that's what this article was about. Yeah, right here. He's causing this Greenwald, as opposed to it just being true. MSNBC did not merely permit fabrications against Democratic Party critics, it encouraged and rewarded them. This, by Nance, was an outright lie. I'm curious, will Joanne Reed correct it on the air? Let's hear it.
Jill Stein was sitting at Putin's table right with General Flynn.
Jill Stein has a show in Russia today.
Jill Stein was sitting at Putin's table.
Jill Stein does not, 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 have a show on Russia Today. I don't even think one is in the works. Jill Stein does not have a show on RT. And even if she did, that would make her no less American than you. But in this case, he's making the point that you're lying there. That's a lie. That's an outright lie. That's you not telling the truth to a large audience. That's you halfway looking into the camera, sleepy-eyed, lying. That's who's lying. That's his point. So a liar doesn't like Glen Greenwald. All right, let's go to the next one. Now, this one, Near Tandon even got in on this. Visit any graves of murdered journalists or political opponents? Or nah? Somebody kind of made the point to her. The largest contributors to your think tank is Chuckle's democracy-loving United Arab Emirates. The people who are starving and murdering or assisting Saudi Arabia in starving and murdering Yemenis. That's great. Hypocrisy much? Near. And here's the other one, the big one. Polygraph. A reporter who never trusts any government and an LGBT activist voicing support for the government of Russia that criminalized public expressions of non-traditional sexual relations manifested in the public demonstration of personal perverted sexual preference in public places. Now, this is the one that's interesting. Polygraph. It's supposed to catch truth tellers, right? I mean, it's even in the name, polygraph. A reporter who never trusts any government and LGBT activists voicing support for the government of Russia. Now, you heard this for yourself. Did you hear him voicing support for anything? He just said why he was there.
For publishing the documents,
just so we're clear, you can listen to him again. Do you hear him voicing support for anything? He's just saying he's there to try to make this thing of the criminalization of Russia or the demonization of Russia in each and every context. Even, oh, you have Russia on you. It's like just the very association to some degree gets this kind of tarring. He's saying it's nonsense. I think it's nonsense. So I won't necessarily be stopped from going to places where I think the witch hunt is nonsense. Now, that's not the same thing as him saying the regime is great or Putin is awesome. No. That's just him going to the country. At no point will you hear him voice support for the Russian government. Listen to this. And by the way, there's a difference between a people and the government of a country.
Whistleblower Edward Snowden. Greenwald is currently in Moscow for a cybersecurity conference. He says much of America's political class believes Russia is genuinely the #1 enemy.
There's an obsession in the United States with viewing Russia not just as an adversary, but as an actual enemy. It's permeated both political parties. There's actually talk a lot now about how what they regard as the interference in the 2016 election is similar to Pearl Harbor when the Japanese attacked the United States during World War II, or
all of that is true, by the way. You've had people putting out, this was synonymous Well, I've heard the Pearl Harbor thing. That's, again, it's somewhat nonsense. You haven't even nailed down the fact that the Russians did anything, and let alone you're talking about Pearl Harbor. But he's right. He's absolutely right. Let him keep going.
Al Qaeda and 9/11. And so there's this sense that Russia is now an enemy on par with Al Qaeda or the Japanese during World War II. Russia is often talked about this way, in the sense that any kind of connection with or interaction with Russia is viewed as inherently suspicious or even worse. And it's extremely dangerous and extremely toxic. And it's one of the reasons why I decided to come here. And this morning posted a picture of myself in Snowden, because I think it's very important to combat that attitude.
At no point in that interview did I hear him give these accolades that Polygraph, supposedly is telling me the truth, said he gave. It's as if this polygraph is lying to me, or it's as if this polygraph is giving me some kind of propaganda. Well, hey, maybe it is giving propaganda. Let's look at what WikiLeaks posts. Right here. When lie detectors lie. Polygraph, a United States government-funded and controlled outlet formerly part of Voice of America, is meant to quote-unquote fact-check Russia fake news, yet here it fabricates claims against the United States government's critic. It's a propaganda arm of the United States. It's lying on Glen Greenwald. It's literally a propaganda arm of the United States, polygraphed and named in this Orwellian way. That's amazing. Glen Greenwald himself recognizes what's taking place and nails it. Where is it? Matt Taibbi even gets in on this. Where is it? Right here. This is a United States government-funded and controlled news outlet blatantly lying about what I said, fabricated quotes of mine, and claiming I voiced support for the government of Russia when I did no such thing. The United States is drowning in propaganda like this. Well, that's interesting. How are we drowning in propaganda? That's an interesting thing. Look at what Max Blumenthal put. Since Obama administration repealed Smith-Mundt Act, forbidding domestic propaganda, the United States-funded operations like Bellingcat and Polygraph have surfaced and are licensed to attack American critics of U.S. foreign policy with reckless abandon. Understand what he's saying. This organization, Polygraph, is a news outlet that is essentially a propaganda arm of the United States. Now, the interesting part to this story is not so much that they attacked Glen Greenwald, even though, whatever, that is somewhat interesting. It's more so how they did this, because this was somewhat forbade by the United States government. We weren't necessarily supposed to propagandize our people in this kind of overt way. And yet, since 2012, when Obama signed the National Defense Authorization Act, nixing Smith-Mundt was in that act. The Ministry of Truth is what people were calling it or dubbing it. Now you see the effects. Propaganda washing throughout the society itself. Propaganda that was used at one point against foreign governments, even now, against foreign governments, is now used on United States citizens. It's amazing. And this propaganda arm was wielded, aimed, and launched at Glen Greenwald. I'm going to read this part, and I'm not going to keep this one too long, but U.S. repeals propaganda ban, spreads government-made news to America. For decades, the so-called anti-propaganda law prevented the United States government's mammoth broadcasting arm from delivering propaganda to the American audience. But on July 2nd, that came silently to an end with the implementation of a new reform passed in January. The result, an unleashing of thousands of hours per week of government-funded radio and TV programs for domestic and United States consumption and reform initially. Criticizes what? This is weird. I'm sorry. There's a period at the end of this. TV domestic consumption in a reform initially criticized as a green light for U.S. domestic propaganda efforts. So what just happened? Until this month, a vast ocean of U.S. propaganda produced by the broadcast board of governors such as Voice of America, Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, and Middle East broadcasting networks could only be viewed or listened to at a broadcast quality in foreign countries. The programming varies in tone and quality, but its breadth is vast. It's viewed as more than 100 countries in 61 languages. The topics covered include human rights abuses in Iran, self-immolation in Tibet, human trafficking across Asia, and on-the-ground reporting in Egypt and Iraq. The restrictions of these broadcasts was due to the Smith-Munn Act, a long-standing piece of legislation that has been amended numerous times throughout the years, perhaps most consequently by Arkansas Senator William Fulbright. In the 1970s, Fulbright was no friend to Voice of America and Radio Free Europe and moved to restrict them from domestic distribution, saying they should be given the opportunity to take their rightful place in a graveyard of the Cold War relics. Fulbright's amendment to Smith-Munn was bolstered in 1985 by Nebraska Senator Edward Zursky, who argued that such propaganda should be kept out of America as to distinguish America from the Soviet Union, where domestic propaganda is principal government activity. Wow. Think about what's being said. We're spying on our citizens to some magnificent degree that I don't think the Soviet Union can ever touch. And now we're at the point where we're directly giving propaganda to the people of the country. Where have you gone wrong? Think about that for the moment. Where have you gone wrong? You are literally giving propaganda to your citizenry, while at the same time overtly spying on that citizenry, even breaking the law in many respects in order to do that spying, putting a band-aid on it with this kind of FISA warrants nonsense. Where did you go wrong? Why do you need to do this? I think that's one of the questions that need to be asked. Why do you need to do this? Why do you need to give propaganda to your audience in this way, meaning the American public in this way? Why now? I think the question needs to be meditated on. I don't think that's as simple as, hey, just give some propaganda to them and make this work. And mind you, it was under the Democratic president, remember that did this. It was under the Democratic president that said, yes, it is okay to give propaganda to the American audience, to bring them over to a particular way of thinking. Zelensky and Fulbright sold their amendments on the sensible rhetoric American taxpayers shouldn't be funding propaganda from American audience. So did Congress just tear down the American public's last defense against domestic propaganda. BBG spokesman Lynn Will insists BBG is not a propaganda outlet, and its flagship services such as Voice of America present fair and accurate news. No propaganda outlet calls himself a propaganda outlet. They don't. What I've just seen here, however, is that you went after a journalist. And you said a reporter who never trusts any government and LGBT activists voicing support for the government of Russia. Look, everybody can look at this video. I'm putting it at the bottom. You can look at it for yourself. You can look at it all sorts of ways. In no way did Glen Greenwald give support. Sounds like a propaganda outlet to me. It's amazing. This is what we've devolved to. All right. We're right here. They don't shy away from stories and don't shed the best light on the United States, she told Cable. She pointed the charters of the VOA and the RFE. Our journalists provide what many cannot get: locally uncensored news, responsible discussion, and open debate. Yeah, open debate within certain lines, I'd imagine. I would imagine if you're pushing a particular American perspective, there are going to be certain lines of that debate that I would imagine is not necessarily there. I.e., look at regular mainstream news now. And I suspect that news is going to be tailored to the place where it is in order to get the maximum effect for that particular audience. It is a propaganda outlet, and you've unleashed this on the American public. A former U.S. government source with knowledge of the BBG says the organization is no Pravda, but it does advance U.S. interests in more subtle ways. In Somalia, for instance, Voice of America serves as a counter-programming to outlets peddling anti-American or jihadist sentiments. Somalis have three options for news, the news source said: word of mouth, Al-Shabaab or VOA Somalia. This partially explains the push to allow BBG broadcasts on local radio stations in the United States. The agency wants to reach a diaspora communities such as St. Paul, Minnesota's significant Somali expat community. Those people can get Al-Shabaab. They can get Russia Today, but they couldn't get access to their taxpayer-funded news sources like VOA Somalia. The source said it was really silly. Lynn added that the reform has a transparency benefit as well, doesn't it now? Now Americans would be able to know more about what they're paying for with their tax dollars. Greater transparency is a win-win for all involved, she said. And so with that, we have the Smith-Munn Modernization Act of 2012, which passed as part of the 2013 National Defense Authorization Act that went into effect this month. But if anyone needed a reminder of the dangers of domestic propaganda efforts, the past 12 months has provided ample reasons. Last year, 2 USA Today journalists were ensnared in a propaganda campaign after reporting about millions of dollars in back taxes owed by the Pentagon's top propaganda contractor in Afghanistan. Eventually, one of the co-owners of the firm confessed to creating phony websites and Twitter accounts to smear the journalists anonymously. Additionally, just this month, the Washington Post exposed a counter-propaganda program by the Pentagon that recommended posting comments on the USA website run by a Somali expat with readers opposing Al-Shabaab. Today, the military, more focused on manipulating news and commentary on the internet, especially social media, posted material and images without necessarily claiming ownership, reported the Post. But for BBG officials, the references to Pentagon propaganda efforts are nauseating, particularly because Smith-Munn Act never had anything to do with regulating Pentagon, a fact that was misunderstood in the media reports in the run-up to the passage of the new Smith-Munn reforms in January. Look, I'm putting this at the bottom. You can read it for yourself, and you can come to your own conclusion. What I know is Glen Greenwald goes to Russia. He's an American citizen. He can go anywhere he wants, providing they let him in the country. This guy smeared him. This guy's a liar. He got on national television live through his teeth. Lance. Near Tandon tried to smear him, but got caught in her own smear, seeing as she was also working for people who were killers. She was also working for people who were killers, got blood on their conscience. And this last organization is literally a propaganda arm of the United States, spewing propaganda to the United States. Just be aware. Just be aware. So, I'm not going to keep this one long. I just wanted people to be aware. There is a lot of smearing of Glen Greenwald going on, and I think all of it is nonsense. Look, I like Glenn. Glenn has always been straight up from standpoint of this kind of Zen approach to looking at the world. How can you say that that's unfair for them, but it's perfectly okay for somebody else? I like him, and I just like him. What they're smearing him with is nonsense. It's utter nonsense. He went to Russia. Oh, he's a Russia agent. He's a Putin puppet. He's all this stuff. He just thinks what you guys are talking about is utter nonsense. And the fact that the propaganda arm of the United States got involved in this makes it that much worse and makes it that much more dubious. Think about that. Propaganda arm of the United States paid for by the taxpayer. Essentially, lie to me. Here's money. Now lie to me. Wow. All right, I'll end it here. If you enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe, and of course, you can always support the Patreon. Thanks, guys.